what is social engineering? Well, it's the act of manipulating people. So when when social engineer tries to attack someone, he's usually doing it for his own benefit, right? So probably against the defensive side. Why would somebody do that though, right? So, well, think about it this way. If you have 10 people in front of a building and you know that they are all pretty good security and you don't want to screw around with them, right? So you would gonna go with the weakling, right? So if there is a entrance at the back and you know we can go in, you're gonna do it, right? But the main biggest reason why people do it is because people are different than computers, right? Computers can be easily deployed, updated securely, and that's it. You're done with it, right? Humans, not so easy. Humans are harder to drill it in them, right? So they need to understand what social engineering is. They need to understand the tricks behind it. They need to understand why it works, and then they can defend themselves. So that's why we are doing this presentation. So that's why the mindset is so important, right? So we want you to understand how it works, why it works, and then you can defend yourself. You need to be able to assess when an attacker is attacking and when it's not an attacker, right? So in this presentation, we're gonna try to showcase you some of those examples of an attacker doing such things, hopefully successfully. Failure to to understand this, well, you can see a lot of examples of companies losing a lot of money due to very simple social engineering attacks. So we don't want that to happen, do we? Uh, the main three advantages are intelligence uh, to the defenders, right? It's intelligence, legal strong framework, and robustness. So first let's start with intelligence, right? So people can react in real time to the situations as they come. If you have a computer and it's configured to protect against certain threat, that's it. That's all it's gonna do. If there is another type of threat, it's gonna ignore it completely because it was not configured against that. People are different, right? People are intelligent. We think about stuff, and that's the main key to to protecting ourselves against the social engineering attacks. We have to think about it and would is this normal? Should this even happen? Is this even possible to happen? Maybe it sounds too ridiculous to be true. And this is why this protective effort to increase our security is so important. If you have more people and all of them are trained properly in the art of social engineering, then we can defend ourselves better against it. The law. So a law is really, really good deterrent against social engineering. But why? Why, you might be asking? Well, think about it. Do you really want to get punished really, really severely for something really stupid like, I don't know, going into a restricted area where you really, really shouldn't be, but hey, you somehow ended up there, right? No, not really. Well, the law really, really helps against that. Unlike computer hacking, it's way stricter against social engineering attacks, which is good for us as defenders. Robustness. So when a computer gets a bad update, it crashes, it screws up, it just errors out, logs it, and that's it, right? Humans don't do that. Humans are way, way more robust, right? Emotionally, maybe not so though. So this is what you have to see here, right? Social engineering is gonna try to act on the emotions of a person and tries to decrease the robustness, and we want to increase it, right? We want to be able to tolerate the changes in the environment, right? Like computer, it just sees a different type of attack. Nah, that's it, bro. I'm not gonna do anything. Person, he's capable of doing something against it, and that's what we want to see. That's the main goal of social engineering defense.
So there are also some significant disadvantages to humans as a component of the security system. Next slide, please. So whilst being its greatest strength, the greatest weakness of humanity is its intelligence, its ability to think independently. People take clever shortcuts, such as leaving in backdoor to their systems to improve testing times. Using procedurally generated passwords. So password 1, password 2, password 3, every time they need to change their password. They can also be, once they're convinced to work against you, they can be incredibly hard to detect, as they use that intelligence to shroud their true intentions. And also, people don't do directly what they're told. Unlike a computer, where every single action is the result of human instruction, humans acting independently can cause a whole bunch of interesting bugs that weren't caused by anyone's actions or lack of action, but because people just think for themselves. Next slide, please. Also, unlike computers, which can be monitored and logged 24/7, doing this to a human is a human rights abuse. You can't just constantly point a camera at someone in their job 24/7, having someone watching them, having someone watching that person, and so on, as no one will want to work at your company and everyone will leave. Also, people lie and exaggerate on audits, not just to try and big themselves up, but to try and make sure that they don't get in trouble. Computers won't lie about whether they've been hacked to stop themselves being told off by management, but people will. Next slide, please. And just like computers, humans can be compromised. This includes blackmailing and extorting them, suggesting bad ideas such as, hey, I found this great password manager on the internet, which is actually a piece of software you wrote that leaks all your passwords to the attacker. Things like bribery can be particularly effective at just paying someone to do the wrong thing. Also, people can just get angry at you and decide to damage your organization. Whilst it sometimes feels like that's how computers behave, it's usually not. And of course, rushing and just plain incompetence is responsible for 99% of the security bugs you find in the real world. Usually, someone wasn't paying attention, and they got taken. Their code got broken because they didn't think about this one specific instance of a check in one of the thousands of API endpoints they've got. Or they didn't think to check someone's ID, or something like that. Next slide, please. Humans are also a lot more expensive than computers. A single person, the average wage in the UK is about 30 grand a year. That's about £2.5 grand a month. If you think about how much computer you can buy for £2.5 grand, I mean, the most expensive box you can find on DigitalOcean is 100 and 200 quid a month, far less than any single person. If you've got, and of course, besides you don't want a computer, you just stop for it. If you've got a physical computer, you can even just sell it on and actually make a bit of a profit that way. But with a person, finding someone in the UK is incredibly difficult, which can often open you up to lawsuits and a whole bunch of other pain. It can cause other people to leave the company because they're worried about losing their jobs. A whole bunch of stuff that just does not happen with computers. And a low pay, if you don't pay people enough, it can lead to people not trying as hard as their job, or even just outright resenting you and doing things to try and take your organisation down. Next slide, please. People are also often overlooked in security audits, whereas with computers you can say, these are the computers that handle our front-facing web traffic, these are the computers that handle our databases. You can't categorise that easily. Both formally, someone's job description is usually a lot more broad than an individual computer component, and informally they'll have a lot of access to individual things. Someone who is known as the tech support person in an organisation will be given access to systems far, far beyond what they're formally supposed to have access to, because they're the person who fixes things. And as such, people often have a surprising amount of access. The classic thing being cleaners being able to enter anyone's room, usually after hours when no one's watching them. And the level of damage someone could provide in that situation is far more than you would expect of someone who is paid as low as a cleaner is. And you can also, on the flip side of this, just use the fact that people overlook security audits as an attack vector. If you walk in looking like a builder or a maintenance man with a hard hat, a high vis jacket, and a ladder, no one's really going to stop you. If you walk in wearing a suit and an earpiece, you look like a member of security, and definitely no one's going to want to stop you there. And you can use these views, you can use these perceptions people have of their of who has security clearance and who doesn't, to massively attack very weak areas that might not necessarily be obvious, I suppose. Next slide. So we're now going to start talking about the actual social engineering attacks you get. Unlike the other talks we give at Cybersoc, we're going to be almost entirely looking at defense. And the reason for that is it's really, 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 really illegal. The low-level offences are things like theft and fraud, get you criminal record, large fines, maybe prison time. To be an offence, all you need to do is gain a material advantage, which sounds pretty nebulous, in a way that people generally consider dishonest, which also sounds pretty nebulous. These things are crimes of dishonesty, which means that once you get it, I mean, things like being a lawyer and things like that are just immediately out of your reach. You can't get a job as a lawyer with a crime of dishonesty. Even outside professions where it's an explicitly forbidden thing to have a criminal record of that form, it's still very hard to get a job. And even if you are only prosecuted but not found guilty, it's still a massive amount of time wasted. And if it gets into the media or something like that, people won't accept the fact that you've been proved innocent, not proven guilty, as sufficient. They'll still hold it against you for the rest of your life. If your social engineering goes particularly bad, and this has happened before, people have a mental breakdown as a result of significant social engineering, even when sponsored and contracted in by their company, you can get jail time. It doesn't matter what's written in a contract. There's no way of writing a contract that's legally enforceable which involves someone having a mental breakdown. Just in the same way that you can't use as a defense for killing someone, I had a contract with someone to do it. And of course, on the extreme end, you have things like blackmail and extortion, which will just definitely get you jail time if you're convicted, and you're never going to be able to get any decent job again. Not even in basic entry-level software engineering. Just no one's going to want to hire you if you're the person who did blackmail or extortion. And that's assuming you actually ever leave jail, which is frankly not desperately likely. Next slide, please. This is something at Cybersoc we take a very strict stance on. If we find out that you have blackmailed someone, or that you have, fraudulently stolen money off someone, we're going to call the police. This isn't like a small thing like, oh, whoops, I just realised I got admin on a server. This is a serious crime, and we call the police. Next slide.
Okay. So, when attacker tries to attack social engineer a company or a place, I guess, he will most likely try to make you to rush in your work. For example, if a woman calls with her baby crying, right, you're gonna feel the sense of urgency, which is good for attacker because he's trying to make you make mistakes and make you rush. This is way more effective way of making you do something, because he can always be like, okay, I have to go. It's like he always has a reason for it, right? And nobody's perfect. Everybody gets affected by this. The attackers can also make mistakes, though. So you have to find that way of urgency in his attack. And if you sense it and you notice that it's not normal and he makes mistakes in the story or something like that, then you follow it, and then you can try to find out, okay, this is an attack and I get it now. Harlan?
Sorry, my mic was muted. Phishing is probably the most common form of attack of social engineering. It's probably one you've all come across. The classic thing of which is going around a lot at the moment is a Facebook message with a YouTube video or something where it says click the link to see a funny message or something like that, and you click it and it gives you a spoofed login form. You've also got the classic things of winning a massive amount of money by filling in this survey or by clicking on this link. You've got the slightly more advanced things like message from your bank or pretending to be from your bank saying your payment hasn't gone through, please call this number for more details, or from your mobile service provider saying we're going to cut off your phone service unless you give us 25 more quid. You've got things like lawyer things. So have you been in an accident that wasn't your fault? Please give us all of your personal details. The classic stuff. These can range quite a lot in complexity. The low level stuff of just a spam email sent to loads of people doesn't get too many people, but well-crafted attacks can fool even the organisations it's pretending to be from. There's been many instances where phishing attack pretending to be from a bank has actually been opened by members of that bank. And on the extreme end, you have things like spear phishing, where you design a phishing attack for a specific target. Often this is part of a larger attack, so they'll be trying to hack into the front end of the website, but also trying to infiltrate through the back end at the same time. So if you notice an attack that seems particularly well constructed and particularly tailored towards you, it's important to report it to whoever does security at your institution, because that could be the key piece of information they need to put together a whole bunch of disparate events that turn out to be one large attack from a malicious actor. Next slide. So there's a whole bunch of different forms of scamming and impersonation, which is sort of the more interesting side of social engineering. These things range from things like advanced fee scams. Your classic Crown Prince of Nigeria wants to send you £1 million. You just need to pay a 200 quid fee to get it sent to you. Things like impersonation calls, so pretending to be your bank, asking for your personal details. You've got things like triangulation fraud, a bit more complex, but the idea of using someone's greed to sell. So the idea is you buy something, an attacker buys something with a stolen credit card, and then resells on that item. And once the credit card gets cancelled, they still have the money they made from their sell. And usually it's sold at a ridiculously marked down price, and so the buyer doesn't ask too many questions. And of course you have your standard cons, so pyramid schemes, Ponzi schemes, things like that, which are very well known and well covered elsewhere. Next slide.
Okay, so when attacker attacks, he doesn't care about all those. Well, he cares about all those biases, right? So it might sound politically incorrect, but everybody has their own bias. So if I say think of a cleaner, right, you probably think of certain gender, race, or age, or combination of all of them, right? So the attacker is gonna try to use this in his own for his own advantage, right? He's gonna try to blend into that role he's trying to act as, like a caring mother that's I don't know, about to calling you on the phone saying, hey, I need help, my husband is coming, blah blah blah, right? So this is very hard to detect. They try to blend in as much as possible, right? But there is always certain kind of tells. For example, maybe their badge is literally nothing on the badge, right? So this happens a lot. So as a defender, every company has a company culture, right? So the same clothes, for example. I don't know, everybody looking tidy. This is one way to ensure that social engineering attacks don't happen. Well, they still happen. So let's say that there is a back entrance, right? And people are smoking and everybody's chilling, right? So now we have to come back into the door, back to work, right? You see a guy who's literally like just came in and he's just like vaping with you, talking with you, and then he wants to come in with you, right? But he doesn't have their badge because they forgot it. Well, what do you do, right? Most of the people will let them in. That's wrong though. Like it should never happen. Yet it happens all the time, right? The first thing you should do is be like, nah, go to the security guard, or personally you can take them to the security guard. Probably personally taking them to the security guard would be way more pain in the ass in this case, because at the end of the day everybody has a certain time in the day and they probably don't want to deal with them. But just taking a mental note of what happened, and like if you see them inside and you see them without a card, suddenly, social engineering attack, like you can see that happen. uh, they will try to make social engineering attackers will try to make an artificial sense of urgency. So they will try to make it sound as if their thing is really, really important. They have to do it right now, or they are rich, you're gonna run out of time. They will try to tell you the best story of their life, right? They will tell you so much stuff. Like you're gonna be able to say, okay, yeah, he's over eager to explain his story, right? This is rare. Like when somebody's telling you a story, they probably don't give you too much details. Like so, if you hear about it and you suddenly see like inappropriate shifts in tone and manner due to uh, too much of adrenaline, you can tell, okay, yeah, this guy, something is wrong with him. But you have to know about those things, and if you don't know about those things, honestly, you will never notice such an attack. But that's why we're trying to tell you about this. Bribery. So everybody likes money, right? If you have a underpaid staff like a cleaner, because we like this example, it's easier to bribe them. Why is it easier to bribe them? Well, most of the time, most of the people don't care about cleaners too much. They are not really nice to them, right? They treat them pretty badly. And that doesn't help with the feeling of alliance to your company. If you're not treated well, would you really care about your company? Not really. If everybody treats you well, not well, then would you really care about them? No. And if you can make money, why not, right? So this is a slippery slope, and you should watch. If you own a company and if you're in manager position, you probably should care about this. And if you're just an employee, it's better to know about those things and to see the world in a different light. Blackmail.
So I'm going to talk about some of the more extreme end of stuff. So you've got things like blackmail. Blackmail's the most famous one, I suppose. Um, as I have said probably about 10 times during this talk, blackmail's really, really, really illegal. Please, 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 please don't do it. But a common misconception with blackmail is it happens only to people who have something they're trying to hide from people. You know, it happens to someone who's actually a murderer who has run away, or someone who runs a large criminal gang or something. No, it's a lot. It can happen to anyone, even the most innocent of individuals. A common technique used is to so, for instance, you bribe someone to give you the names of everyone working in your department because they'll say they're doing some form of you know, I don't know. So, they're saying they're doing a survey. They want to get everyone's information on your floor. Could you please give them a copy? And then slowly build it up to giving emails, phone numbers, things like that. And as soon as someone turns around and goes, "Hey, I'm not competent with that," use the previous stuff to get them to do it more. And this can be used as a sort of slippery slope to push them into doing worse and worse things with the threats of the discovery of everything before. Of course, things don't have to necessarily be this complicated and involved. Often people just, crawl through a recent database dump when Ashley Madison was hacked, or various adult content websites, or politically dubious forums where people wouldn't necessarily want their real world identity to be tied up to that. Then and these sort of dumps happen every so often, usually every year or so. There'll be a big one where millions of people's personal information is leaked from a bad site, and people read through these lists and contact everyone involved, trying to scam them into giving them money or more personal information or something like that. And of course, you don't actually need to have anything against the person. A common attack used against children is, a picture of them or a picture of a sort of a fuzzy image of a dark room of someone watching adult content, sending them a picture of it and saying, "We'll send this to all of your friends. We know what you did." And that can be incredibly damaging, especially to a young person who isn't, who's worried about that sort of thing as more than an adult would be. It's a particularly nasty attack, and it's very effective. It pulls in vast amounts of money for these attackers. And of course, blackmail is often a good fallback for the attacker once their standard techniques of bribery and coercion stop working, is to use the effects, use the information they have on you that they've gathered through your various criminal activities for them against you as blackmail. So there are a couple of common signs of this. You'll see people who are being blackmailed will be incredibly stressed and jumpy. They're terrified that someone will find out their secret. And often they'll be coerced into pulling other people into it on risk of them, sort of in the same way you pivot through computers in the network, an attacker will pivot through people they've blackmailed. Of course, the best defense against blackmail, unfortunately, is basically just to let it out, is to give up trying to hide whatever secret they're going and accept the consequences. Because generally, it will just keep getting worse until you do that. Next slide.
I've recently had this case where if you know how you guys get emails with blackmail, right? Some random emails. I know what you guys get, but I got my password and the front of it was there, but the back of it, like the last letters were hashed out, and a guy was like, "Oh, I'm gonna release your password." The problem was this password was like 100 breaches ago, but like you can see how even small things can cause people stress, because if somebody says, "Hey, I have your password," and I'm gonna like give it to everybody, even though you don't know the guy, you don't know even what the hell is he talking about. Yeah, no, people get scared.
Extortion is the most extreme one here. You're basically not going to come across this unless you start making friends at the mafia, because it's incredibly risky for the attacker. Unlike things like blackmail and cons and things like that, you are directly putting yourself in front of the person, threatening them. And that means that they can probably ID you. It means that you have provably committed a horrifically large offence. It's it's generally only done by people who believe themselves to be above the law, like large crime organisations. And frankly, they'll only do it if they really, really care about you, which will probably again only be if you have dealings with them. So don't make deals with the mafia, I suppose, is the takeaway from that. It's not like on TV where every week the mafia will turn up at someone at some data center asking for the credentials of all their users. They won't do that. That's not happens. This isn't something you'll have to worry about too much. It's just important to keep in mind if you're a large organization, this does start to become a worry. Next slide.
So,
Okay.
there was a Verizon study that we checked, and apparently 30 to 50% of the breaches are internal. So whether it's they getting bribed or whether they do it because they want to get back at coworkers, it's internal stuff, right? So those type of social engineering attacks you can't really do a lot about, because you don't really know who could be a threat. But it just gives you the idea that even among your coworkers and your family members, you'd never know who who gets angry, who doesn't, right? Like you could probably tell before that who uh, doesn't work on their emotions, but it's not always that easy. So the best idea to protect against stuff like this is, well, simple, plain simple. Do not share your password with anyone, right? If you can, please separate your accounts, like even bank accounts. I highly recommend it. So many cases where somebody gets angry, like an ex, and then sends something, "Oh, I hate blacks" or something like that on Twitter, and then Twitter takes you down and you go in trouble and you don't want to have the hassle of all of that. Like even your most trusted people, you just don't give them your details, your passwords, your accounts, if possible. I know this is not always possible, but please do that. Also, logging. Logging is really, really useful, right? Because I forgot the point. Sorry, guys.
Um, to finish that, the thing about logging, which makes it particularly useful,
Go
is
on.
that you give. No, no, no. It's actually in the next slide, so you
Ah,
can go ahead. It's fine. Right. So audits and logging are possibly the most important mitigation rather than prevention. The idea is that you can, once you've discovered someone or something is acting badly within your system, you can track down where it is, track down other things that could be influenced by that bad actor, and shut it down. If you have a trail of accountability, that also means when it comes down to lawsuits, you don't have to worry about, well, you have to worry less about the wrong people being charged or the right people not being charged. You also want to go for something called the principle of least privilege. I think we mentioned this in our last talk, but we'll probably mention it in every future talk. The idea is every component of every security system should be given the minimal amount of power possible to complete its job. If the receptionist can't let you pass the gate, then there's no point trying to socially engineer the receptionist because they can't do anything to help you. It also reduces your attack surface. If there are less people to be attacked, that means the social engineer then has to go and find out who specifically they need to go for, rather than just trying to find anyone in the organization. To that end, you want to reevaluate people's permissions as frequently as possible. I mean, the more frequently you do it, the more irritating it becomes, and it can become a whole bureaucracy. But if you, for instance, every year pull each person aside and ask them about, check what permissions they have on your system, and make sure to revoke anything they don't need anymore, because people usually accumulate permissions throughout their time. Someone has given them temporary database access and forgot to revoke it, and things like that. This sort of craft builds up over time, and eventually you need to clean it away to make sure that this person doesn't become a massive security risk. Another important thing is to use weaker punishments for small-scale infractions to reduce the chance of blackmail. People should be able to come forward and say, yes, I did leak the list of names of people on my floor to this bad actor, so that they don't, and not get completely destroyed by it. Because if they aren't scared too much of management, destroying their lives over something, it's much harder to blackmail them. Of course, you have to balance that against the actual the damage that causes, in the sense of people not feeling it's too bad and more likely to do something like that. There is a balance to be struck there. But if you give draconian punishments, then blackmail becomes a lot easier. And finally, and this is one which is a lot more controversial, you can go for things like random spot checks. So occasionally, just like at airports, the chances of actually catching a specific terrorist as they walk into a plane to try and blow it up is rather low. But if you do random spot checks at the front, it also gives the illusion of a much greater security and scares people away. The sort of illusion of security is very important. Security through obscurity isn't great, but security theatre does give additional benefit in that it reduces the number of people likely to attack your system. But yes, spot checks can be inconvenient and can drive people away from your company. So you do have to balance that as well. Anyway, I think that's everything of this presentation.